I'm Carrie Corbet-owen. Hi. I grew up in apartheid South Africa, and in the months before the release of Nelson Mandela, the violent terrorist, the fear amongst us whiteys around dinner tables in the evenings was palpable. You knew you were going to be murdered in your beds the moment he was released. It was a time of huge trepidation and fear, and the white-controlled media did everything in its power to keep those perceptions alive. Yet, a short 4 years later, those same white people that had so feared Nelson Mandela lined up in their droves to vote for him. I remember the day of voting for Madiba, which means father of the nation. It was a hot summer's day, so hot that the asphalt shimmered. And lining up as far as the eye could see, curving around buildings at every voting station, were whites and blacks, rubbing shoulders. There was a festive feeling in the air as we voted for the man that we had grown to love in those 4 short years. And so the question for me became, what was it about Nelson Mandela that he could take such huge amounts of fear and transform them into love for him? What was it about the power of the man? Nelson Mandela was born on the 18th of July in 1918 to the Royal Tembu family. He was a Xhosa-speaking man. His birth name was Rolihlahla, which means pulling the branch of a tree. But more colloquially, it meant troublemaker. And depending on which side of the political aisle you were, the political apartheid aisle you were, he was either a troublemaker or someone with greatness. But he had to walk the path of a troublemaker in order to be seen as one of the world's greatest peacemakers. Dr. Phil McGraw says, "We teach people how to treat us." What can we learn from Nelson Mandela that he taught a fearful nation how to treat him, how to love him, and how to retain peace in their hearts? Because there was something about the heart of Nelson Mandela that changed the hearts of a nation. And more importantly, how do we not just learn from Nelson Mandela, but how do we emulate him? Fact is, we often pray for more peace and more love in the world, only we don't seem to grasp the how-to of peace and love. And I think Nelson Mandela holds the key for what we need to open the door to more peace and more love in this world. And I'm reminded of the story of a young novice who was taken into a forest by a priest in order to be taught to pray. And as they entered the forest, a giant monster with vicious eyes and flaring nostrils appeared. The novice was terrified, but the priest showed love to the monster and he went away. This happened many times, but one day on his own he went into the forest, and when this fearsome character arrived, he opened his heart, exuded love, and his shield of love was sufficient to protect him. The monster turned and left. One heart had changed the heart of a violent creature. Now in Shirley MacLaine's book, The Camino, A Journey of the Spirit, she tells the story of walking through a deserted Spanish village that had been overtaken and overrun by wild dogs. And she says that in that moment, she opened her heart and sent out the protective force of love, and those wild dogs turned and left her unharmed. One person's heart had turned away the viciousness of a group of animals. And what about Immaculée Ibigaliza, the Tutsi woman who survived the Rwandan genocide, most of it being locked with others in a very tiny bathroom, hearing outside the voices of Hutus who were out to get her, the Hutus who had killed her family and killed her friends. And yet, when it was all said and done, and she was leading a group of refugees out, and she came across a group of Hutu militants, instead of fearing them, she stood her ground and vibrated out love for those Hutus that had killed and murdered her family. And they were allowed to pass, her and the refugees, unscathed. One person had changed the hearts of violent men. In the same way, Nelson Mandela, having spent 27 years of his life in a prison, was almost overnight able to change the hearts and minds of an entire nation. One man changed the hearts of a nation. And so I said about investigating, what is this power of love and peace to change and transform things? And I came across the work of Dr. John Hagelin, who has a theory called superradiance. This is the term that he used to describe the positive impact that a group of meditators had on violence, crime, and social disorder. Now, in the 1930s in the Middle East, in Lebanon, experienced meditators, just meditating, were able to reduce war deaths and injuries as well as the incidents by bombings. And the chances of this being a coincidence was 1 in 10,000. So how does one explain that? Well, to summarize the many teachings of Deepak Chopra, there's an energy that runs from and between us and through us and connects everybody and everything. And according to the law of attraction, every thought, every intention, and every deed vibrate out, sending out a frequency that attracts like in return. So when you're thinking about the future, when you're planning the future, when you're dreaming about the future, you're sending out an energetic signal that has power beyond measure. And in his book, The Secret Mode of Prayer, best-selling author Greg Braden shares an intriguing idea about prayer that comes from the Bible of 24, verse 16. It reads as follows: "Ask without hidden motive, and be surrounded by your answer." He explains how this works by sharing a story of Native Americans and how they create rain. So they don't ask a deity to provide what isn't there. They merely surround themselves with the answer as if it were there, and they are just calling on it to make itself known to them. They smell rain. They feel the droplets on their upturned faces. They see the lush greenness as the desert comes to life. They are surrounded by their answer. Now, Nelson Mandela had a powerful dream. He says that he dreamed of an Africa in peace with itself. And he didn't just sit around and wait for that to happen. He became the peace that he wanted to see. Not only did he become the peace, but he vibrated that out with such a force that it attracted the same in return. He vibrated it out so powerfully that it changed the hearts of millions. So how did he do this? On the day that he was released from prison, he was holding his wife's hand as they walked towards a car that would take him home. He says that he realized something incredibly important. He says that he realized that if he kept his hatred for his captors alive, as he had done for many years, they would own him. They would own his heart and his mind, and he didn't want them to dictate his emotional state. He knew that if he wanted to be free, he had to forgive them, which didn't mean condoning what they had done as right, but it freed him to allow him to make the choices that would determine his emotional state. Because he realized that his oppressors could rob him of everything if he didn't have peace of mind. If he didn't make the choice to let them go, they would own him. He says he knew that forgiveness, which led to love and peace, was a choice. It was a choice that he made in those moments, knowing that if he wanted to create peace, he was going to have to work with his former enemies. After all, the pain of what happened is inevitable, but choosing to relive it and to hold on to it, that suffering is optional. You can make a different choice. Nelson Mandela showed us that. And if you're giving your power away to those who have wronged you, that's your choice too. After all, you can't change what happened to you in your life, but you can choose how you determine that you will interpret them and how you will feel about them. And going back to what I heard Greg Braden say, when he interviewed Tibetan monks about this lost mode of prayer, the abbot of the Tibetan monks told him, the feeling is the prayer. So when Nelson Mandela chose peace and love, that was the prayer he was choosing. In other words, it's through this intangible language of feeling that we participate in peace or in violence, as Greg Braden describes it. If feeling is the prayer, and we're always feeling, we are always in the process of praying. Each moment is a prayer. Life is a prayer. We're always sending a message to the mirror of creation, signaling peace or war, love or hate. And those go out into the soup of creation and create our world. So when we choose, like Nelson Mandela did, to become the peace, to become the love, that's the energy that we're sending out into the world to create a different, a more peaceful, and a more loving world. That's what will change the hearts of a nation. That's what will change the hearts of the world. As Dr. Hagelin says about superradiance, those positive results were achieved by meditators creating internal peace, but radiating that out to become outer peace. That's exactly what Nelson Mandela did. As one participant from these peace efforts of superradiance said, we don't pray for certain things to happen for a leader or a country. We simply emanate and celebrate peace. Peace is an awareness, a consciousness, rather than something that we do. It's something we become. And here's the interesting thing, thinking about what one man, Nelson Mandela, did for the Rainbow Nation of South Africa. Scientific research on the superradiance effect describes perfectly what one person, Nelson Mandela, did for an entire Rainbow Nation. They found that it takes relatively few people, sometimes only one, to effect significant change. For example, in a city of about 1 million people, it only takes 100 people vibrating peace and love to bring down crime rates, change the amount of accidents, and create more peace. In a world of 6 billion, it only takes about 8,000 united hearts to bring about peace. That's something we can all contribute to. We can follow Nelson Mandela's example. We can emulate what he did. And just like he changed the hearts of a nation, together our combined hearts can change the world. So you may be asking, why is it that such a few people can effect such a large change? That one man can affect a whole nation? And I think the answer for that is to be found in the work of Dr. David Dawkins, who wrote Power versus Force. He went and used muscle testing all over the globe with populations that were young and old from different cultures and different creeds, and he created what is known as the map of human consciousness. And on that, he plots the scale of human emotions from shame, which is the lowest emotion, to peace and love, which are very high emotions, and he's given them a value. So shame, for example, logs in at a value of 20, whereas love calibrated at 500 and peace at 600. And the turning point is around the value of 200, which is courage. And at that point, muscle testing will stay strong. Dr. Dawkins points out that the map of human consciousness is a logarithmic scale, which means that love, which calibrates at 500, isn't only 5 times stronger than fear, which calibrates at 100. It is exponentially more powerful than fear, which is why so few people vibrating the high energy of love and peace can change the world, or why one person vibrating at love and peace can change the hearts of an entire nation. So as Mandela showed us, the powerful legacy that he left the world with, something we can all emulate, is when we become the peace, when we become the love, we can change the world. I call it the Nelson Mandela effect. You have it, I have it, we all have it. Nelson Mandela just showed us how to use it.